Hi guys, it's Florian, and in this video I'm going to talk about if the PhD I did 7 years ago was really worth it. So stay tuned. When I finished my diploma, which is something like a master's degree in electrical engineering, I was actually asked by my supervisor if I wanted to pursue a PhD afterwards, and I declined, so I didn't want to. I wanted to see the world, I wanted to work, I wanted to see what it is to be an engineer, but I didn't want to do a PhD. So I actually went to work afterwards, after I studied for 1.5 years, and then returned to university. I returned to the university because I didn't really feel that being an engineer, being an embedded software engineer, programming the whole day was really the thing I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I thought that a PhD might give me some more perspective, some more possibilities, maybe some more capabilities that I can use to do something else, something a bit more broad. So engineering or embedded software engineering is really deep into specific topics, and you don't see a lot around you. You can get an expert, you can make a decent living from it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I actually returned to university after 1.5 years to computer systems. So it was about formal verification of processors. That's what they did there. I wasn't really passionate about that, I wouldn't say that, but I was capable of doing it. And since I didn't really want to be in this embedded software thing as a programmer anymore, I thought it might be a good idea. I did my PhD in Germany, so what you have to know about Germany and engineering PhDs is that usually you get paid for it, so it's not, you don't do it for free. You make a salary of a teacher. That's what you get, and to receive that salary you have to basically do a lot of lecturing, so teaching and exercises, laboratories, supervising thesis. All of this is also part of your PhD in Germany. So it's not only the pure research thing, it's also the lecturing thing. And in the end, that was what I benefited most from. It wasn't the research thing, but let's see why that is. So when I started there, you get a 5-year contract. So you're good for 5 years, and if you finish in this 5 years, everything is fine. If you finish later, you have to see where the money comes from. So when I started, I had a supervisor who was short before retirement, so I was the last generation of PhD students that he supervised, and he didn't have any projects anymore in his department, so I needed to find a topic. There was no topic. I wasn't hired to do a specific research project. I needed to find my own research project, and that took me maybe half a year. So I needed to work to find out what was the real thing I wanted to do, what was a topic that is also worth doing for a PhD. And after finding that, you need to do some research, you need to publish stuff, and you need to be accepted at conferences. So all of that was really tough at that time, I remember. I didn't really know if someone really liked what I did. So that put a lot of stress on me, I would say. What was also the point is that in the end you have to write a thesis, and I also didn't know if my supervisor liked it. So since he didn't give a lot of feedback, I had no idea if it was really good enough. So it was a lot of stress, and failure was not an option for me. So since I quit my previous job and I went back to university, I didn't want to fail. So everything but not finishing in the end I wouldn't have accepted that for myself, which also put even more stress on me. So it was a really stressful time, the PhD. And not only that, but it was also that I got fathered 2 times and had 2 little children at home, which are also a lot of work. I worked next to my PhD as a consultant, so as a freelancer, which was also a lot of work. I received some certifications like certified tester, ITIL, and so on, which was also a lot of work. So I didn't only do the PhD, I did a lot of things next to it, which in the end turned out to be valuable, but at that time were a lot of stress. So I didn't have any time for myself during that time. It was getting up in the morning, doing stuff, and then going to bed. And that was really stressful. So I remember that time as being really, really a stressful time. And the things I learned from my research weren't, I wouldn't say they were that valuable in the end. They weren't not valuable, but they didn't really bring me that far. I wrote about requirements engineering and product lines and so on. And it's good to know these kind of things, but it's not important. If you don't know them, you can learn them. It wasn't that technical what I did. But what I really benefited from, and I didn't know that before, was actually from the teaching part. So before I did my PhD, I didn't know that I actually liked being in front of people and talking about things I know and helping them to improve their knowledge in whatever things they study. I guess I was pretty good at giving lectures and exercises and so on. I also liked supervising thesis. That was a thing that I really enjoyed. It was pretty different from what I did before, because in a thesis you must know that the guy who writes the thesis is actually hierarchically lower than you are, and you still want him to succeed. But you need to tell people if you are not satisfied with what they do. And that is something you don't do usually. So it's not something you do with your colleague or your coworker or your fellow student, but you have to if you are a supervisor of something. Or if you have an exam that you corrected and people complain about their marks and their gradings and how you corrected it. It's also a situation that you do not face usually. It's basically being accused of being too strict or not fair or whatever. So all of these things basically train you. They train your leadership skills. They don't necessarily train your technical skills, but being responsible for people, being responsible for their results, and being responsible for them performing and enabling them is something that you need as a leader. So actually the teaching part really trained my leadership skills, and it really gave me a perception that is an interesting thing. So it's really a thing that I was good at, and that was interesting to me to actually supervise things, supervise projects, drive them, make the people who work with me better in what they do. So that was something I really learned, and I also learned how to cope with people who are not satisfied. So especially the emotional intelligence part. So what do I do if someone basically doesn't agree with me, but in the end I call the shots? What do I do then? How do I make him not so frustrated? These were all things I learned from my PhD. Not from the thesis, but from the work I had to do next to it. So I really recommend lecturing and giving exercises and whatever when you do a PhD. Do not only do the technical part, do something next to it. Even if you think it's so stressful, but if you have 2 kids and a job next to it, it's even more stressful. So you should try to really Not only stick with some topic that is really technical, but take the time and use it wisely to do other things. Because these were the things that in the end gave me the most benefit. What doesn't give you a benefit is receiving the sheet of paper in the end, which is actually your certificate that you have a PhD. It has no benefit at all. It's just a piece of paper. You don't get more money if you have it. You don't get more credit if you have it. It is not really worth a lot from my point of view. Saying I'm doctor of anything is not, from my point of view, doesn't give you any more credibility. I guess some people think it does, but I don't think so. But the things I learned gave me a really new path. At the beginning, I wanted to not be an embedded software engineer anymore, or not being a pure embedded software engineer. I like the engineering part, but it's not the thing I wanted to do until I retire. So what I did after my PhD is actually I started working for a startup that I consulted during my job next to the PhD. And that was a mistake, I would say, in the end, because actually I was already at a small company before, and I learned all of the things, how companies run and what you need to do in my previous job. So going to a startup didn't give me any new insights. It was not quite different from what I did before. And you don't have any career path in a startup. So if you do a PhD, don't join a startup. You can start your own company if you want to work in this environment, but do not work for someone who started one. That is something I really learned. So the first year after my PhD, I was doing that, and I was doing project management there, and also embedded software engineering. So the things I learned basically. After that, I applied to a job for again a senior embedded software engineer, who also should introduce Scrum in the company and the agile way of working. That was a company that had 2,000 people, so not a startup anymore. And I must say, in this kind of company, you have much better career path, especially if you're a PhD, because there I guess the PhD counts a little bit. It's not worthless to do it if you join a larger company. So when I started there, I also benefited a lot from what I learned with all the emotional intelligence stuff in the university. Especially if you have to introduce agile in a company that has hundreds of engineers, it's really challenging. So I supported that for maybe a year or so, and that was also working, interestingly, and it was working because I guess I did the PhD before and had all these students that I supervised and did all these lectures and so on. I guess I did a pretty good job at that, and also at engineering. So I started to do some web development for devices, so some IoT industrial web development next to the agile thing. That was also successful. So after roughly 1.5 years, I got promoted and I got the deputy lead of the department. So I had 10 engineers reporting to me, and that was also a new situation. So I never had really engineers reporting to me, it was just students, but what I learned from university also helped me a lot there, how to deal with people that actually report to you. During that time, I also took part in restructuring another department, so basically setting a new direction for the department, but also for the projects in there, which I guess gave me even more credit. So afterwards, I became the head of the process stuff in engineering and also the technology stuff. So I left the embedded software world and did a lot of things like stage gate processes, reporting from agile projects, reporting to the company who owns us, all of these kind of things. So a whole management level. Didn't have anything to do with engineering, but the engineering actually helps if you do agile and lean in production and stage gate processes. It's basically like a state machine. It's basically like things running through a process, like an idea through a product generation process, or a product through a production. It's always the same, and it always helps when you know the stuff from computer science. So for this part, actually, what helped me is that I actually knew computer science, and it helped me that I knew how to deal with people. So those two things were really important. Yeah. After that, I guess I also did a great job in there. So maybe 1 year after I started doing that, the position of head of the embedded software department became free, and they asked me if I wanted to do that. So I became the head of the embedded software department, and I had 20 people reporting to me. So I didn't write any line of code anymore. I guess I wasn't that good, or I am not that good anymore at that, because I'm out of practice. But it's not so important. So the moment you have a 2-digit number of people reporting to you, you don't do so much operational work, I would call it, or programming if you are an embedded software engineer. You just supervise projects. You have to do all of the work with the employees, like some negotiations, bonus goals, whatever. So there's a lot of things you do, but it's not programming. So actually, I what I planned to do before is being maybe part of embedded software, but not writing it for my whole life, is something I actually achieved there already. So it turned out to be really good until then, and after that, so that was maybe 2 years ago, but half a year later we merged with another company that had also 1,000 employees. So we were then a 3,000 employee company with locations all over the world, and they asked me if I would take over the embedded software part for the whole organization. For 4 locations worldwide, which I did. So then I had over 50 people in my department, and I didn't write any embedded software anymore. But it didn't really matter to me. It was more management, more organizational work, but not so much really programming. You need to know how to program. You need to know how to generate code, how to do continuous integration, all of this stuff, but you don't need to do it on your own anymore. And that's actually where I am right now. So currently I am heading up a department of 50 plus people in an organization of 3,000 people, and it's going pretty well. So the career path after my PhD, I would say, was also going pretty well. But I think I couldn't have done it with a PhD. So if I would now come to the part where I tell you if it was really worth it, I guess it was. So without the PhD, I would have never taken this career path. I wouldn't have had the capabilities to do it. I wouldn't have the belief in myself that I was able to do it, that I really can do it, because that's something that is really important. If someone asks you to take over a department, to ask yourself, do I think I can do it? If the answer is no, you can't. The answer has to be yes. And I guess the answer would have been no for me if I wouldn't have done the PhD. And also, I don't think that anyone would have asked me, because I guess the things I learned, especially about how to deal with people, especially the leadership skills I acquired during the PhD, were necessary to go there and to get in this position. So for me, it really turned out well. And in retrospect, I must say the time, that, however hard it was worth it. And even that it was so hard was worth it. So it was actually the hardest thing I did in my life. I never had a time that was more challenging than the PhD time, which seems negative, but actually it's really positive, because every job you have after it seems quite easy. I didn't have a job that really stressed me yet. So whatever comes after the PhD, if you really struggle, if you really have to do a lot of things and so on, is always easier than your PhD. So once you went through it, you can always compare everything to your PhD, and you say, yeah, okay, it's hard work and it's a lot of work maybe, but it's easy compared to whatever you did before. So that's the case for me. When it comes to money, I guess I never really thought about it. So I didn't do the PhD to make a lot of money in the end. I actually, for my personal life, do not need too much money. If someone would double my salary, I wouldn't really know what to buy from it. I wouldn't buy anything else like I do now. But actually, it's pretty good. So the money part also worked out pretty well. But it shouldn't be your goal, because money usually follows performance. So if you are performing pretty well, no matter if you have a PhD or not, you will get a lot of money in the end. And if your career path, the choices you make, go to a more larger company and you perform well, you will earn a lot of money. That is for sure, especially if you go to the Western world, like the US, Canada, or Europe, especially Germany, Austria, Sweden, Denmark, whatever. All of these countries pay really good money if you have a good education and if you perform well. So that's not the issue. What you should do if you do a PhD right now, or if you plan to do one, is maybe think about the path you want to go. Not the actual path, so you don't know exactly what you want to do, but do you want to become an expert in something, or do you want to become a more global player, or do you want to become a manager or whatever? And you should consider if what the fundamental choice of the things you want to do afterwards really is, and then also during your PhD train for that. I did it more accidentally, so I didn't plan to do what I did, but if someone would have told me, I guess I would have trained in exactly this this area. So in the end, everything fine. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.